Cut her salary in half, and let us see who she really is. The words fall cold and sharp across the polished glass table, and no one in the room dares to question them as Daniel Brooks leans back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes unreadable. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glows in the early evening light, but inside the boardroom, the air feels heavier, almost suffocating. Emily Carter stands near the far end of the room, clutching a thin folder against her chest, her heart pounding so loudly she is certain everyone can hear it. She does not understand what she did wrong. One small mistake on a report, a number entered incorrectly, something she corrected within minutes, and now this. A cut that will take away the rent she has barely managed to hold on to, the groceries she stretches across each week, the fragile balance of a life already on the edge. Daniel does not raise his voice. He does not need to. Accountability matters, he says calmly, as if discussing whether, not a person's survival. Emily swallows hard, forcing herself to nod even as her hands tremble. Around her, coworkers avoid her eyes. No one speaks. No one helps. In this building, power does not shout. It decides. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. Emily steps out of the boardroom into the bright, spotless hallway, but the light does nothing to steady her. Her vision blurs as she walks, heels clicking against marble floors that suddenly feel too loud, too exposed. She makes it to the elevator just as the doors begin to close, slipping inside and pressing the lobby button with shaking fingers. The silence inside the elevator wraps around her, thick and unforgiving. She stares at her reflection in the mirrored wall, at the faint crease in her blouse, at the exhaustion beneath her eyes. This job was supposed to be her chance, her way out of the endless cycle of overdue bills and quiet desperation. Now it feels like another door slamming shut. When the elevator opens, she steps into the lobby, barely noticing the security guard's polite nod. Outside, the city air hits her, cold and sharp, and for a moment she just stands there, breathing, trying to hold herself together. She reaches into her bag and pulls out the envelope they handed her, her paycheck already reduced, already smaller than she feared. Her fingers tighten around it as a single thought echoes in her mind, louder than anything Daniel said, louder than the city itself. How am I going to survive this? Emily does not remember how long she stands on the sidewalk before her legs finally move, but the city does not pause for her confusion, for her fear, or for the quiet collapse happening inside her chest. Traffic rushes past in streaks of yellow and white. People brush by her without a second glance, and somewhere in the distance a siren cuts through the air like a warning she cannot escape. She begins to walk with no real direction, her heels slower now, uneven, her grip tightening around the thin envelope, as if it might disappear if she loosens it even slightly. The cold creeps through her coat, settling deep in her bones, but she barely notices. All she can think about is the number printed on that check. The number that no longer matches the life she has been trying so hard to hold together. Rent is due in 4 days. The pharmacy bill for her younger brother's medication is already 2 days overdue. She had planned everything down to the last dollar. Every meal, every bus ride, every late-night calculation whispered to herself in the dark. Now none of it works. None of it adds up. She turns a corner without realizing it, her mind too loud, her steps automatic, until a sudden commotion breaks through the noise in her head. A woman's voice, strained and desperate, calls out from across the street. Emily stops. There, near a flickering streetlight, a young mother kneels on the cold pavement, her arms wrapped around a small child whose body trembles in short, uneven bursts. The child's face is pale, lips slightly blue, eyes barely open. The mother's voice shakes as she pleads with passers-by, asking for help, asking if anyone can call for assistance, asking if anyone has cash for a ride to the nearest emergency room just a few blocks away. People slow down, glance, hesitate, then keep walking. No one wants to get involved. No one wants the responsibility. Emily feels something inside her tighten, a sharp pull that she cannot ignore. She steps closer without thinking, her heart beginning to race for a different reason now. Is he breathing okay? She asks softly, kneeling beside them, her voice steadier than she feels. The mother nods quickly, tears streaming down her face. He has a condition, she says, her words breaking apart. I just need to get him to the hospital. I do not have enough for a ride. I used everything for his last treatment. Emily's gaze drops to the child, to the fragile rise and fall of his chest, to the small hand gripping his mother's sleeve. For a moment, the world narrows to just this choice. Behind her, the city keeps moving, indifferent, relentless. In her hand, the envelope suddenly feels heavier, like it is no longer just paper and ink, but something far more dangerous. It is safety. It is rent. It is food. It is survival. And now it is also the difference between whether this child gets help in time. Emily's fingers tremble as she slowly opens the envelope, her breath catching as she sees the reduced amount again, smaller than she ever imagined it could be. This is all she has. There is no backup, no one waiting to save her if she lets it go. The mother looks at her with a fragile kind of hope, the kind that breaks easily, the kind that should never have to exist. Emily swallows hard, her mind racing, calculating, resisting. If she gives this away, she does not just fall behind. She falls apart. But if she walks away, she will carry this moment with her forever. The child lets out a weak sound, barely more than a breath, and something inside Emily shifts, quiet but absolute. She closes her eyes for a fraction of a second, as if bracing for impact, then looks at the mother again. Take it, she says, her voice barely above a whisper but unwavering. Her hand extends, the envelope trembling between her fingers. Please, just get him there. The mother stares at her in disbelief, shaking her head at first. No, I cannot take that. You need it, she says, her voice filled with guilt and hesitation. Emily shakes her head gently, a faint, almost broken smile forming on her lips. He needs it more. The words come out simple, but they carry everything she has left. The mother takes the envelope with shaking hands, gratitude and desperation colliding in her expression as she pulls the child closer and quickly stands. Thank you, she whispers, her voice cracking under the weight of it. Within seconds, she is moving, hurrying down the street toward the hospital, the child held tightly against her chest. Emily remains kneeling on the cold pavement long after they are gone, her hands empty now, her future uncertain, her breath uneven as the reality settles in. She has nothing left, nothing except the quiet certainty that she could not have chosen differently, even if it costs her everything. Daniel Brooks does not follow her immediately, but he does not leave either. From across the street, partially hidden behind the dark reflection of a storefront window, he watches everything unfold in silence, his posture still, his expression unreadable at first glance. He had stepped out of the car only minutes earlier, intending to clear his head after the meeting, after making what he believed was a calculated decision, a controlled test, nothing more than a measured evaluation of character. He had done it before. Quiet adjustments, pressure applied in just the right places. People revealed themselves quickly when comfort was taken away. Most held on tighter. Most protected themselves. Most proved him right. But this was not what he expected. He sees Emily kneeling on the pavement long after the mother disappears into the distance, her shoulders slightly hunched, her hands empty, her entire body still, as if she has given away not just money, but something deeper, something that cannot be replaced. A strange tension settles in his chest, unfamiliar and unwelcome. He exhales slowly, but the feeling does not leave. Instead, it grows. He replays the moment in his mind, every detail sharp and undeniable. The hesitation in her hands, the way she looked at the envelope before letting it go, the quiet certainty in her voice when she said he needs it more. There was no performance in it, no calculation, no attempt to be seen. She did not even know anyone was watching. Daniel straightened slightly, his jaw tightening as something shifts beneath the surface of his usual control. This was not part of the test. This was not supposed to happen. He tells himself it changes nothing, that one emotional decision does not define a person, that kindness under pressure can still be temporary, conditional, even naive. But the thought does not settle the way it normally would. It does not convince him. Across the street, Emily finally rises to her feet, slowly, as if the weight of what she has done is only now beginning to press down on her. She does not look relieved. She does not look proud. She looks uncertain, fragile in a way that has nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with reality catching up. Daniel watches as she wraps her arms around herself, as if bracing against a cold that is no longer just the air. For a brief moment, he considers walking away, returning to the version of himself that would have dismissed this as an anomaly, a single data point that does not alter the pattern. That version of him has always been efficient, safe, untouched, but his feet do not move. Instead, he reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen before dialing a number he rarely uses for anything personal. The call connects quickly. "I need you to look into someone," he says, his voice low, controlled, but lacking its usual detachment. He gives her name, Emily Carter. He pauses, his eyes lifting again to where she stands under the streetlight, alone now, smaller somehow against the vast movement of the city. "Full background," he adds after a second, his tone quieter. "Financials, medical, everything." There's a brief silence on the other end, then a confirmation. Daniel ends the call, but he does not put the phone away right away. He keeps it in his hand, his gaze still fixed on her, as if trying to understand something that does not fit into the structure he has built his life around. People do not give away what they cannot afford to lose. That has always been one of his core beliefs. It is what separates strength from weakness, strategy from emotion. And yet she did it without hesitation in the end, without guarantee, without return. The city lights flicker across the glass beside him, reflecting a version of himself that suddenly feels less certain than it did an hour ago. Emily begins to walk again, slower this time, her steps uneven but determined, disappearing gradually into the flow of the crowd. Daniel finally lowers his phone, slipping it back into his pocket, but the image of her kneeling on that pavement does not leave him. It lingers, sharp and persistent, challenging something deeper than logic, something he has not questioned in a very long time. For the first time in years, Daniel Brooks is not sure he made the right decision, and the realization settles in quietly, but with a weight he cannot ignore. The next morning does not bring clarity for Daniel Brooks, only a quiet unrest that follows him into his office before the city is fully awake. The skyline outside his window glows pale under early light, but his attention is not on the view that once grounded him. Instead, a thin file rests on his desk, placed there less than an hour ago, its contents compiled with the kind of efficiency money can buy, but cannot always justify. He stands for a long moment before sitting, his fingers resting lightly on the cover, as if opening it will confirm something he is not yet ready to accept. When he finally does, the pages inside unfold a life far removed from the assumptions he made so easily. Emily Carter, age 27, administrative assistant, salary already below industry average even before the reduction. No savings, no safety net, medical expenses listed in quiet, unforgiving detail tied to a younger sibling with a chronic condition requiring consistent treatment. Late rent notices, payment plans barely holding together. There is no excess in her life, no hidden cushion, no sign of the kind of desperation that breeds manipulation. Only endurance, only survival. Daniel leans back slightly, his eyes scanning each line again as if repetition might make it less real. It does not. Instead, each detail sharpens the memory of the night before, of the envelope in her hands, of the way she let it go anyway. A slow breath leaves him, but it carries something unfamiliar, something closer to discomfort than control. For years, he has built decisions on data, on patterns, on the belief that pressure reveals truth. But this truth does not align with any pattern he knows. A soft knock breaks the silence. His assistant steps in, careful as always, her posture professional but observant. She notices the open file, the slight tension in his expression. "You asked for the report," she says gently. Daniel nods once, closing the folder but not pushing it away. "Set up a meeting with her," he replies, his voice steady but quieter than usual. "This afternoon." His assistant hesitates for a fraction of a second. "Is there a concern with her performance?" she asks, choosing her words carefully. Daniel pauses, his gaze drifting briefly back to the file before returning to the neutral calm he is known for. "No," he says after a moment. "There's a concern with mine." The words linger in the air longer than either of them expected. His assistant nods slowly and steps out, leaving him alone again with the weight of a realization he cannot dismiss. Across the city, Emily Carter wakes in a small apartment that feels colder than usual, the morning light slipping through thin curtains and landing softly across a space that holds more worry than comfort. She lies still for a moment, staring at the ceiling as the memory of the night before settles over her like a quiet storm. The envelope is gone. The money is gone. The decision is irreversible. She turns her head toward the small table beside her bed where a prescription bottle sits, nearly empty, a reminder of what comes next. There is no panic yet, only a heavy awareness that today will require strength she is not sure she has left. Still, she pushes herself up, moving through the familiar routine that gives her just enough structure to keep going. Coffee she cannot afford but makes anyway. A quick check on her younger brother, who sleeps in the next room, his breathing steady for now. A whispered promise she is not certain she can keep. By the time she leaves the apartment, her shoulders are squared, her expression composed, but beneath it all, the uncertainty remains, sharp and constant. She does not know that a meeting has been set, that decisions are already shifting in a world she has no access to. She only knows that she must keep moving, because stopping is not an option. Back in his office, Daniel stands once more by the window, the city now fully alive beneath him, but for the first time in years, the view offers no answers. Only questions, and at the center of them, one name he cannot ignore. The call comes just before noon, short and formal, the kind of message that usually signals trouble, not opportunity. Emily is standing at her desk when her supervisor approaches. Her expression carefully neutral, her voice low enough to avoid drawing attention. "Mr. Brooks wants to see you." His office. 1:00. For a second, Emily thinks she misheard. The words do not quite register, as if they belong to someone else's life, not hers. Then the meaning settles in, heavy and immediate. Her stomach tightens. Around her, the office hum continues as if nothing has changed. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, quiet conversations flowing, but for Emily, everything shifts. A meeting with Daniel Brooks is not routine. It is not casual. It is final. She nods slowly, forcing herself to remain composed. "Thank you," she says, her voice steady despite the sudden rush of thoughts crashing through her mind. The moment her supervisor walks away, the whispers begin, subtle but sharp. Curious glances, quiet speculation. No one says it out loud, but the assumption is clear. Whatever happened yesterday was not enough. Something worse is coming. Emily lowers her gaze to her desk, pretending to focus on her work, but the numbers blur in front of her. She knows what this could mean. Termination. There would be no warning, no second chance. Just a decision delivered calmly, the same way her salary was cut, clean and irreversible. She swallows hard, her hands tightening slightly around the edge of the desk. If she loses this job, there is nothing left to fall back on. No savings, no support, only the fragile thread she has been holding on to, now fraying faster than she can repair it. Time moves strangely after that, too fast and too slow at once. Every minute feels stretched, every second carrying the weight of what might happen when the clock reaches 1. When it finally does, Emily stands, smoothing her blouse with careful hands, as if small details might give her some sense of control. The walk to the executive floor feels longer than usual, each step echoing louder in her ears. The elevator ride is silent, the mirrored walls reflecting a version of herself that looks composed but feels anything but. When the doors open, the atmosphere changes immediately. The noise of the lower floors disappears, replaced by a quiet that feels deliberate, controlled, powerful. She steps out, her heart beating faster now, her breath measured but shallow. A receptionist greets her with a polite nod and gestures toward a large wooden door at the end of the hall. "You can go in," she says softly. Emily hesitates for just a fraction of a second, then nods and walks forward, each step heavier than the last. When she reaches the door, she lifts her hand and knocks gently. "Come in," Daniel's voice calls from inside, calm and steady, as if this meeting carries no weight at all. Emily pushes the door open and steps inside, the space immediately overwhelming in its scale and simplicity. Floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines, everything in place. And at the center of it, Daniel Brooks, standing near his desk, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. He looks exactly as he did the day before. Controlled, composed, untouchable. Emily steps forward, stopping a few feet from the desk, her hands clasped lightly in front of her to hide their slight tremble. "You wanted to see me," she says, her voice quiet but clear. Daniel studies her for a moment, his gaze steady, searching in a way that feels different from before, less clinical, more deliberate. There's a pause, brief but noticeable, as if he is choosing his words more carefully than he usually would. "Yes," he replies finally. "I did." The silence that follows stretches just enough to make the air feel heavier. Emily prepares herself, bracing for the outcome she has been expecting since the moment she received that envelope. But instead of immediate judgment, instead of dismissal, Daniel takes a slow step forward, his voice lowering slightly as he speaks again. "I want to ask you something," he says. Emily blinks, caught off guard by the shift, by the absence of accusation, by the unexpected direction of the conversation. "Yesterday," Daniel continues, his eyes holding hers now, steady and intent, "after you left the building, what did you do?" The question lands between them, simple on the surface, but carrying a weight Emily cannot immediately understand. Her heart skips once, her mind racing, unsure why that moment matters, unsure what answer he is looking for. For a second, she considers deflecting, keeping things professional, safe. But something in his tone stops her. It is not harsh. It is not testing in a way she expected. It is something else. Something quieter. Emily takes a small breath, her fingers tightening slightly before she answers. "I went home," she says at first, the automatic response coming out before she can. "Stop it." Then she hesitates, the memory rising clearly, too strong to ignore. Her gaze shifts slightly, then returns to him, more honest this time. "I helped someone," she adds softly. Daniel does not interrupt. He does not react immediately. He simply watches her, waiting. And for the first time since stepping into that office, Emily feels something unexpected settle in her chest. Not relief, not fear, something closer to uncertainty about what comes next, and why this conversation feels like it is no longer just about her mistake, but about something far more important that she cannot yet see. Emily's words linger in the air, soft but undeniable, and for a moment the entire room feels suspended in something neither of them fully understands. Daniel does not respond immediately. He studies her, not with the distant evaluation she has come to expect, but with a focus that feels more human, more searching. "You helped someone," he repeats quietly, as if testing the weight of the sentence rather than the truth of it. Emily nods once, her posture still guarded, her instincts telling her to remain careful, to reveal only what is necessary. But something in his tone unsettles that instinct. It is not accusation. It is not authority. It is curiosity layered with something deeper, something she cannot quite name. "A mother and her child," she says after a moment, her voice steady but softer now. "They needed to get to the hospital." Daniel's gaze sharpened slightly, not in suspicion, but in recognition. He takes another step forward, closing the distance just enough to make the conversation feel less like a formal review and more like something personal. And you decided to help, he says. It is not phrased as a question, but it carries one beneath the surface. Emily exhales slowly, her hands still clasped, her fingers pressing lightly together as if grounding herself. Yes, she answers simply. Daniel tilts his head just slightly, his expression shifting in a way that is almost imperceptible, but enough to change the atmosphere between them. With what, he asks. The question is precise now, direct in a way that removes any ambiguity. Emily hesitates, not because she regrets what she did, but because saying it out loud makes it real in a different way, makes it harder to protect, harder to keep separate from the consequences she is already facing. Her eyes drop for a brief second before returning to his. My paycheck, she says. The words land quietly, but they carry a weight that fills the room. Daniel does not look surprised. That is what unsettles her the most. Instead, something in his expression tightens, a flicker of something restrained, something that almost resembles regret. He turns slightly, walking a few steps toward the window, his back partially to her now as he processes the confirmation of what he already witnessed. The city stretches out below, vast and indifferent, but his focus is no longer on the skyline. It is on the realization settling in, heavier with each passing second. He caused this, not indirectly, not as part of some distant system. Directly, the reduction he ordered forced the choice she had to make, and she chose to give anyway. Emily watches him carefully, confusion beginning to replace fear. This is not how she expected this meeting to go. There is no lecture, no reprimand, no immediate decision, just silence and a tension that feels unfamiliar in a room designed for control. Why? Daniel asks finally, still facing the window, his voice lower now, stripped of its usual authority. Emily blinks, caught off guard by the simplicity of the question. Why did you give it away? For a moment, she does not answer. Not because she does not know, but because the answer feels too simple for a question that sounds so complicated. She shifts her weight slightly, her voice quieter when she speaks again. Because they needed it, she says. Daniel turns back slowly, his eyes meeting hers again, searching for something more, something hidden beneath the surface. You needed it too, he replies, his tone not confrontational, but steady, almost challenging. Emily's lips press together briefly, a faint tension crossing her expression before it softens again. I still do, she admits. The honesty in her voice is unguarded now, real in a way that leaves no room for interpretation. Daniel holds her gaze, and for a moment, something shifts between them, something that has nothing to do with position or power. Then why? He asks again, quieter this time, not as a test, but as a genuine question he no longer knows how to answer himself. Emily takes a slow breath, her shoulders lifting slightly before settling. Because if I walked away, she says, her voice steady despite the emotion beneath it, I would not be able to live with that. The words are simple, but they land with a force that neither of them expected. Daniel does not respond right away. He cannot. For the first time in years, he is confronted with a truth that does not align with the framework he has trusted, a truth that is not strategic, not efficient, not safe. It is human, and it unsettles him more than anything else could. The silence after Emily's answer does not break immediately, and for the first time in a very long time, Daniel Brooks does not rush to fill it. He stands there, looking at her, but not in the way he looks at employees, not in the way he evaluates performance or measures value. This is different. This is slower, heavier, more personal than he is used to allowing. Something in her words lingers, not just in his thoughts, but deeper, in a place he has spent years learning how to ignore. He exhales quietly and turns away again, his gaze drifting back toward the city. But the view offers no distraction this time. Instead, memories surface uninvited and sharp. There was a time when he believed in people, when he believed that kindness was something real, something worth protecting. Before the lawsuits, before the betrayal, before the partner he trusted walked away with millions and left him to rebuild everything from nothing but reputation and anger. That was when Daniel changed. Not overnight, not in a single moment, but piece by piece, decision by decision. He learned to see people as patterns, as risks, as variables to be tested and controlled. Trust became a liability. Kindness became a weakness. And tests like this one, controlled, calculated, became the only way he believed he could protect what he had built. But standing here now, with Emily Carter in front of him, that system feels incomplete. It feels flawed in a way he cannot easily justify. He turns back slowly, his expression no longer as unreadable as before. There's tension there now, but also something else, something closer to honesty. You realize, he says, his voice steady but quieter, that what you did could have cost you everything. Emily meets his gaze without hesitation this time. I know, she replies. There is no defensiveness in her tone, no attempt to explain or justify, just acceptance. Daniel studies her for a moment longer, then nods slightly, as if acknowledging something he cannot argue with. I need you to understand something, he continues, taking a step closer, his posture less rigid now, less distant. The decision to reduce your salary was not random. Emily's expression shifts, confusion returning, mixed now with a faint edge of disbelief. Then what was it? She asks quietly. Daniel pauses, the weight of the truth settling in before he speaks it. This is not something he admits. Not to employees. Not to anyone. But the usual rules no longer seem to apply. It was a test, he says finally. The words land clearly, leaving no room for interpretation. Emily's eyes widen slightly, the meaning hitting her all at once. A test, she repeats, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying a sharp edge now. You cut my salary to test me. Daniel does not look away. Yes, the honesty is direct, but does not soften the impact. If anything, it makes it heavier. Emily takes a small step back, her hands no longer still, her composure beginning to crack under the weight of what she is hearing. Do you have any idea what that did? She asks, her voice trembling now, not with fear, but with something stronger, something closer to anger. That was not just a number on a report. That was my rent. That was my brother's medication. That was everything I've been trying to hold together. Daniel listens without interrupting, his expression tightening slightly as each word lands. He already knows. He saw the report. He saw the numbers. But hearing it from her, seeing the impact in her voice, is different. It is no longer data. It is consequence. I understand that now, he says, his voice lower, more measured. Emily shakes her head slightly, a short, disbelieving motion. No, she replies, her eyes locking onto his, sharper now, clearer. You understand it on paper. That is not the same thing. The words hit harder than anything she has said before. Daniel does not respond right away, because for the first time, he cannot argue. She's right, and that realization settles in, quiet but undeniable. The balance of the room shifts again, but this time, it is not about power. It is about accountability. And Daniel Brooks, for all his control, is standing in a moment where control is no longer enough. Emily's words hang in the air long after she finishes speaking, and for a moment neither of them moves, as if the truth she just laid out has shifted something fundamental that cannot easily be put back into place. Daniel feels it, the weight of it pressing against the structure he has relied on for years, and for once, logic does not offer him an immediate escape. He inhales slowly, steadying himself, but when he speaks again, his voice carries a different tone, less controlled, more deliberate. You are right, he says, the admission quiet but clear. The words alone seem to alter the space between them. Emily blinks, caught off guard, her anger still present, but now mixed with something else, something uncertain. She did not expect that. She did not expect him to agree. Daniel takes another step forward, not as a CEO asserting authority, but as someone trying to close a distance that is no longer measured in position or status. What I did, he continues, choosing each word carefully, was based on an assumption that people protect themselves first, that when pressure is applied, the truth becomes clear. He pauses briefly, his gaze steady on hers. I believe that was the only way to understand who someone really is. Emily's jaw tightened slightly, but she does not interrupt. She listens, not because she agrees, but because she wants to understand why someone would make a decision that affected her life so deeply without hesitation. Daniel exhales again, the tension in his posture easing just enough to reveal something more honest beneath it. "I was wrong," he says. The statement lands with more weight than anything else he has said so far. It is not defensive. It is not qualified. It is simple and direct. Emily studies him, searching for any sign that this is another form of control, another calculated move, but she does not find it. What she sees instead unsettles her in a different way. He means it, and that makes everything more complicated. "So what now?" she asks quietly, her voice steady again, but carrying a guarded edge. Daniel does not answer immediately. Instead, he walks back toward his desk, resting his hands lightly against its surface as he considers the question, not as a problem to solve, but as a responsibility he cannot ignore. "Now," he says slowly, "I fix what I can." Emily's expression shifts again, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face before she can hide it. "You cannot fix this," she replies, her tone not harsh but firm. "You cannot undo what already happened." Daniel nods once, acknowledging the truth in her words. "No," he agrees. "I cannot undo it." There is a brief pause before he continues, his voice lower now, more grounded. "But I can take responsibility for it." He opens a drawer and pulls out a document, sliding it across the desk toward her. Emily hesitates before stepping forward, her eyes dropping to the paper, her hands slow as she picks it up. As she reads, her breath catches slightly. It is an offer, a promotion, a significant salary increase, far beyond what she had before, along with immediate compensation for the reduction he ordered. The numbers are more than she expected, more than she has ever had access to, and for a moment, the room feels unsteady around her. She looks up at him, her expression conflicted, her grip on the paper tightening. "You think this makes it right?" she asks, her voice softer now, but still holding its ground. Daniel meets her gaze without hesitation. "No," he says. "I think it is a start." The honesty in his answer leaves no room for easy resolution. Emily lowers her eyes again to the document, the weight of the decision settling over her. This could solve everything. The rent, the medication, the constant fear of not having enough. But something in her hesitates, something that cannot be measured in numbers. She places the paper back on the desk, her hand lingering for just a moment before she pulls it away. "I do not want to be part of a system that treats people like experiments," she says quietly. Daniel does not react immediately, but the words land, deeper than she intends, deeper than he expects. The silence that follows is no longer tense in the same way. It is reflective, heavy with the realization that fixing something is not always as simple as offering more. And for the first time, Daniel understands that this situation is not just about compensation. It is about trust, and trust is something he has never had to earn like this before. Emily's refusal does not end the conversation, but it changes its direction completely, and Daniel feels it immediately. For the first time, money has failed him, not because it is insufficient, but because it is irrelevant to what she is asking for. Trust cannot be transferred on paper. It cannot be calculated or increased with a signature. It has to be built, and he realizes, standing there in his own office, that he does not know how to do that anymore. He studies her quietly, the document still resting untouched on the desk between them, a symbol of everything he once believed could solve any problem. "Then help me change it," he says finally, his voice steady, but different, less authoritative, more direct in a way that carries risk. Emily looks at him, surprised again, her guard still up, but her curiosity pulling at the edges of it. "Change what?" she asks cautiously. Daniel gestures slightly toward the space around them, toward the company, toward the structure that has shaped every decision he has made. "The way this works," he replies, "the way I have been making decisions. If what I did was wrong, then I need to understand how to do it right." The admission is subtle, but it is there. Not just regret, but willingness to learn. Emily hesitates, her instinct telling her to walk away, to protect herself from a system that has already proven it can hurt her without warning. But another part of her, quieter but persistent, recognizes something in his tone. This is not a test. This is uncertainty. And that, more than anything, makes him human in a way she did not expect. You cannot fix a system overnight, she says carefully. Daniel nods once. I'm not asking for overnight, he replies. I'm asking for a start. The simplicity of his response leaves little room for argument, but it does not erase the damage already done. Emily glances once more at the document, then back at him, her thoughts moving quickly now, weighing risk against possibility. And what happens the next time you decide to test someone? She asks, her voice sharper again, pressing where it matters. Daniel does not hesitate this time. There will not be a next time, he says. The certainty in his voice is quiet, but it carries more conviction than anything he has said before. Emily studies him, searching for hesitation, for doubt, for any sign that this promise is temporary. She does not find it, but that does not make it easy to accept. Before she can respond, a sudden knock breaks the moment. The door opens slightly, and Daniel's assistant steps in, her expression more urgent than before. I am sorry to interrupt, she says, her voice controlled but tight. There is a situation you need to be aware of. Daniel turns toward her, the shift in his posture immediate, his focus sharpening. What is it? He asks. The assistant glances briefly at Emily, then back at him. The child from last night, she says carefully. The one from the incident outside the building. They were admitted to St. Mary Hospital early this morning. Emily's heart skips, the words hitting her faster than she can process. Is he okay? She asks instinctively, stepping forward without thinking. The assistant hesitates for a fraction of a second before answering. He is stable for now, but the doctors say he needs surgery. It is more serious than expected. The room shifts again, the tension returning in a different form, sharper, more immediate. Emily's mind races, the image of the child on the pavement flashing back with painful clarity. She gave everything she had just to get him to the hospital, and now it is not enough. Daniel watches her reaction closely, the urgency in her expression, the way her composure cracks, just enough to reveal how deeply this affects her. Without thinking, he turns back to his assistant. Give me the details, he says, his voice firm now, decisive in a way that is no longer detached. The assistant nods quickly and steps out. Emily looks at him, confusion and concern colliding in her expression. What are you doing? She asks. Daniel meets her gaze, his answer immediate, without calculation this time. Why should I have done in the first place, he says. And for the first time since this began, his decision is not based on a test. It is based on understanding. The shift from conversation to action happens faster than Emily expects, and before she can fully process what Daniel just said, he is already moving. He reaches for his phone again, his posture sharper now, his voice firm as he dials. I want the best surgical team available at St. Mary Hospital, he says the moment the call connects, his tone. Leaving no room for delay. Full coverage. No limitations. Whatever is needed. He pauses, listening briefly, then adds, and I want confirmation within the hour. He ends the call without another word, turning back to Emily as if this decision is the most natural thing in the world. But to her, it is not. It is sudden, overwhelming, and difficult to reconcile with the man who stood in that boardroom the day before, reducing her salary without hesitation. You cannot just do that, she says, her voice caught between disbelief and urgency. Daniel meets her gaze steadily. I can, he replies, but there is no arrogance in it this time, only clarity. The question is whether I should have waited this long. Emily takes a small step back, her thoughts racing, her emotions pulling in different directions. This is not about you fixing something with money, she says, trying to hold on to the boundary she set just moments ago. That child is not part of your system. He is not part of your company. Daniel nods once, acknowledging her point without resistance. You are right, he says. He is not. There's a brief pause before he continues, his voice quieter but more grounded. But you are. The words land differently than she expects. Not as control, not as ownership, but as connection. And what happened to you led to what happened to him. That makes it my responsibility. Emily opens her mouth to respond, but no words come immediately. The logic is not corporate. It is not strategic. It is human, and that unsettles her more than anything else he has said so far. Before she can gather her thoughts, Daniel steps toward the door. "We are going to the hospital," he says. Emily blinks, caught off guard by the immediacy of it. "Now," he adds. There is no command in his tone, but there is urgency and something else beneath it, something that feels like determination rather than control. Emily hesitates for only a second before nodding, her concern for the child overriding everything else. The drive across the city is quiet but not empty. The noise of traffic fills the space between them, but neither of them speaks. Emily watches the streets pass by through the window, her mind replaying the moment from the night before, the child's pale face, the mother's trembling hands. She wonders if they made it in time. She wonders if what she gave was enough to matter. Beside her, Daniel sits still, his gaze forward, but his thoughts far from the road ahead. For the first time in years, his decisions are not calculated for outcome or advantage. They are driven by something less predictable, something he is still trying to understand. When they arrive at St. Mary Hospital, the shift in atmosphere is immediate. The sterile brightness, the quiet urgency of movement, the sound of distant monitors and hushed voices create a space where control feels smaller, less certain. Emily steps out of the car quickly, her pace faster now, her focus entirely on finding the child and his mother. Daniel follows closely behind, his presence no longer distant, but actively engaged in the moment. Inside, a nurse directs them toward the pediatric wing, her tone calm but efficient. "They are in pre-operation," she explains. "The doctors are preparing now." Emily's heart tightens at the words, her steps quickening as they move down the hallway. When they reach the waiting area, she sees the mother immediately, sitting alone, her hands clasped tightly together, her face pale with exhaustion and fear. The moment the woman looks up and recognizes Emily, her expression shifts, relief breaking through the fear. "You," she says softly, standing quickly. "You helped us." Emily steps forward without hesitation, her voice gentle. "How is he?" she asks. The mother's eyes fill with tears, but she nods slightly. "They say the surgery can save him," she replies, her voice trembling. "But it is expensive. I do not know how I am going to pay for it." The words hang in the air, heavy with reality. Emily glances back at Daniel instinctively, not expecting an answer, not expecting anything. But Daniel steps forward, his voice steady, his decision already made. "You will not have to," he says. The mother looks at him, confusion mixing with hope. "What do you mean?" she asks. Daniel meets her gaze directly, without distance, without pretense. "It is covered," he says simply. "Everything." The room falls quiet, the weight of his words settling over them. And for the first time since this began, the impact of his change is no longer theoretical. It is real, it is immediate, and it is exactly where it should have started. The hours that follow stretch longer than either of them expects, and the waiting room becomes a quiet space filled with tension, hope, and a fragile weight of uncertainty. Emily sits beside the mother, her presence steady, her voice soft as she offers small reassurances that she's not even sure she believes herself, but knows the woman needs to hear. Across from them, Daniel stands near the window, his posture still, his usual sense of control replaced by something far more unfamiliar. He is not directing anything now. He is not deciding outcomes. For the first time in a long time, he is waiting just like everyone else. The red light above the operating room remains on, a silent signal that time is still moving forward, that somewhere behind those doors, a life is being fought for with everything available. Minutes pass, then more. The quiet hum of the hospital fills the space, footsteps echoing in distant halls, voices murmuring just out of reach. Emily glances at Daniel once, noticing the way his gaze remains fixed ahead, the tension in his shoulders no longer hidden. This is not the man she met in the boardroom. This is someone else, someone who is beginning to understand something he has avoided for years. Finally, after what feels like an endless stretch of time, the doors open and a surgeon steps out, removing his mask slowly, his expression serious but not defeated. Everyone stands at once. The mother steps forward first, her voice shaking. "Is he okay?" she asks. The surgeon nods, a small but certain motion. "The surgery was successful," he says. Relief crashes through the room in a wave that is almost physical. The mother lets out a breath that turns into a quiet sob, her hands covering her face as the tension finally breaks. Emily exhales slowly, her own shoulders lowering as the weight she has been carrying begins to lift. For a moment, everything feels still, anchored in that single outcome. Daniel watches the scene, the relief, the gratitude, the raw human emotion unfolding in front of him, and something shifts completely inside him. This is not a transaction. This is not a calculation. This is impact. Real, immediate, undeniable. The surgeon continues, explaining the recovery, the next steps, but the details blur into the background as the significance of what just happened settles deeper. The child will live, not because of a test, not because of a system, but because someone chose to act when it mattered. The mother turns to Emily first, her eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking as she reaches for her hands. "You saved him," she whispers. Emily shakes her head gently, her expression soft but firm. "No," she says quietly. "We all did." Her gaze shifts briefly toward Daniel, not in gratitude, not in obligation, but in acknowledgement. A shared moment, complicated and unfinished, but real. Daniel meets her eyes, and for once, he does not look away. He steps forward slowly, his voice steady, but carrying a weight that was not there before. "I need to say something," he says, not just to Emily, but to the mother, to the moment itself. They both turn toward him, listening. "What happened here," he continues, "should never depend on chance. It should not depend on whether someone is willing to give up everything they have just to help someone else survive." He pauses, the words forming carefully, deliberately. "That is something I intend to change." The statement is not loud, but it carries intention, direction, and something deeper than any decision he has made before. Emily watches him, her expression thoughtful now, her earlier resistance still present, but no longer absolute. She sees the shift, not just in what he is doing, but in why he is doing it. The difference matters. The mother, still overwhelmed, nods through her tears, her gratitude unfiltered, her relief stronger than anything else. "Thank you," she says, her voice breaking again. Daniel inclines his head slightly, but this time, the gesture is not formal. It is human. The waiting room settles into a quieter calm as the immediate crisis passes, but the impact of what has just happened does not fade. It lingers, reshaping the space between them, redefining what this moment means. And for Daniel Brooks, it marks something he cannot undo, not a mistake, but a turning point. One that will demand more than a single decision. One that will require change that reaches far beyond this room. The days that follow do not return to normal, because something fundamental has already shifted, and neither Emily nor Daniel can pretend otherwise. The hospital fades into memory, but its impact remains, carried forward into every decision that comes next. Within a week, the company begins to change in ways that employees do not immediately understand. Policies are reviewed. Compensation structures are re-examined. Quiet conversations happen behind closed doors, not about profit margins or quarterly reports, but about people, about stability, about the unseen consequences of decisions made too far from the lives they affect. And at the center of it all is Daniel Brooks, no longer operating from distance, no longer relying on assumptions that once felt unshakable. Instead, he listens. He asks questions. He pauses before deciding. It is subtle at first, almost invisible to those who expect leadership to remain unchanged, but the difference is there, growing stronger with each choice. Emily notices it before most, not because she's looking for it, but because she feels it in the way the office breathes now, in the absence of quiet fear that once lingered beneath every interaction. She still moves carefully, still carries the weight of what happened. But there's a shift in her, as well, a cautious openness to the possibility that change, real change, is happening. One afternoon, she is called into Daniel's office again, but this time, the tension is different. It is not sharp or suffocating. It is measured, uncertain in a way that leaves room for something new. When she steps inside, she sees the same space, the same view, but the energy has changed. Daniel is not standing behind his desk. He is seated, a file open in front of him, but his posture is relaxed, his expression thoughtful rather than guarded. He looks up as she enters, and for a brief moment, neither of them speaks. Then he gestures lightly toward the chair across from him. "Please sit," he says. Emily hesitates only slightly before doing so. Her movements calm, but aware, her eyes steady on him. Daniel closes the file in front of him and slides it across the desk. "This is different from before," he says, his voice even, but carrying a quiet sincerity. Emily looks down at the document, her hands slower this time as she opens it. It is not just an offer. It is a proposal. A new department, focused on employee welfare, emergency support, and community outreach. Programs designed to ensure that no one within the company is forced into impossible choices without support. And at the center of it, her name. Emily's breath catches slightly as she reads, her eyes moving across the pages, taking in the scope of what he is offering. This is not compensation. This is responsibility. This is trust. She looks up at him, her expression searching, still cautious. "Why me?" she asks quietly. Daniel meets her gaze without hesitation. "Because you already understand what I'm trying to learn," he replies. "And because I cannot build something like this from the outside." There is no pressure in his tone, no expectation, only an invitation. Emily looks back down at the document, her thoughts moving through everything that has happened, everything that led to this moment. The fear, the anger, the uncertainty, and now this. A chance to turn something painful into something meaningful. She closes the file slowly, her hands resting on it for a moment before she speaks. "If I do this," she says carefully, her voice steady but firm, "it is not about fixing your mistake. It is about making sure it does not happen again." Daniel nods once, the agreement immediate. "That is exactly what it should be," he says. The clarity between them settles in, not as resolution, but as alignment. Emily takes a slow breath, then looks at him again, her decision forming not from pressure, but from purpose. "Then I will do it," she says. The words are simple, but they carry the weight of everything that came before. Daniel allows himself a small nod, not of authority, but of respect. And in that moment, the foundation of something new is set, not built on control or testing, but on understanding, on accountability, and on the quiet strength of a choice that neither of them would have made just days ago. Months pass, but the moment that began everything does not fade. It evolves, shaping a future neither Emily nor Daniel could have imagined when they first stood on opposite sides of that boardroom. The company is no longer what it was. The quiet fear that once lived in its halls has been replaced with something steadier, something human. Employees speak more openly. Support systems are no longer hidden or conditional. And at the center of it all stands a program that began with a single impossible choice, now known across the company as the Carter Initiative, a network designed to ensure that no one is forced to choose between survival and compassion again. Emily moves through this new world with a confidence she did not have before, not because her life has become easy, but because it has become meaningful in a way that goes beyond her own struggle. She knows what it feels like to stand on the edge of losing everything, and now she has built something that keeps others from reaching that point alone. Her brother's health has stabilized, his treatment consistent, his future no longer balanced on uncertainty. It is not a perfect life, but it is a life that holds space for hope. One afternoon, Emily finds herself back at St. Mary Hospital, not out of crisis, but by choice. The child she helped that night is there for a follow-up visit, healthier now, his laughter soft but steady as he holds onto his mother's hand. When they see her, their faces light up in a way that words cannot fully capture. Gratitude, relief, and something deeper, something lasting. Emily kneels slightly to meet the child at eye level, her smile gentle. "You look stronger," she says. The child nods shyly, and his mother's eyes fill again, but this time with something closer to peace. "Because of you," she says softly. Emily shakes her head, just as she did before, but her gaze shifts as footsteps approach behind her. Daniel steps into the space, not in a suit that separates him from everyone else, but in something simpler, more grounded. The hospital staff greet him not as a distant figure, but as someone who has been present, involved, consistent in ways that matter. He pauses beside Emily, his attention on the child, then on the mother, and finally on Emily herself. There is no distance left in the way he looks at her now. Only respect. Only something real. "He is doing well," Daniel says, his voice calm, but carrying quiet satisfaction. The mother nods quickly. "Because you did not turn away," she replies. Daniel's gaze lowers slightly, not out of discomfort, but out of humility that once would have felt unfamiliar to him. "Because she did not," he corrects gently, glancing at Emily. The moment settles between them, not as a reminder of the past, but as a recognition of how far they have come from it. Later, as they step outside the hospital, the city feels different, not because it has changed, but because they have. Emily stands beside him, the air cool, the noise of the street surrounding them, but no longer overwhelming. "You're not the same person I met that day," she says quietly. Daniel exhales softly, his gaze lifting toward the skyline before returning to her. "No," he agrees. "I am not." There's a brief pause, not uncomfortable, but honest. "And I do not want to be," he adds. Emily studies him for a moment, seeing not the CEO who once tested her, but the man who chose to change because of what he learned. That difference matters. More than anything else, it matters. "Good," she says, a small smile forming, steady and certain. Daniel returns it, not as a gesture of control, but as something earned, something shared. "I am still learning," he admits. Emily nods once, her voice soft but clear. "Then keep choosing right," she says. The words are simple, but they carry the entire journey within them. And this time, Daniel does not need a test to understand what that means. He already knows. As they walk forward together, not defined by status or mistake, but by choice, the story does not end with what was lost, but with what was built from it. A system changed, a life saved, and two people who prove that real leadership and real love is not about power. It is about what you choose to do when it matters most.